Educators here at the lab, and this is Jamie Amato, and she is going to talk with us this morning about her research on living shorelines. And so with that, I will let her get started.
Hey. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Jamie, and my research is on living shorelines. So before I jump in, does anyone here know what a living shoreline is? Anybody? Jacob, can you tell me what a living shoreline is?
Yeah, a living shoreline is a way to protect your property using like natural materials and essentially like habitat rather than doing like a bulkhead or riprap or some armored shoreline.
Absolutely. So living shorelines in their most basic form have at least one living component, and it is a way to protect your property while also maintaining the health of the environment. So usually our living shorelines incorporate plants or reefs, so we'll get into that. But basically, I'm here to talk to you about what kind of living shoreline you should put in based on your property type. So does anyone here live on the water? All right, so maybe you'll get something out of this. So in Mobile Bay and this region especially, there's a lot of people that have waterfront property. And the more that people colonize these areas, the more erosion we're experiencing. And so we're experiencing erosion from sea level rise, we're experiencing erosion from increased boat wake, and for a really long time, the solution was to put in a bulkhead. So a bulkhead, as you may know, is just a wall that goes straight down in between your property and the water. And there's kind of no environmental benefit to a bulkhead, and it's actually not that great at preventing erosion. We've seen that with a bulkhead, it actually disrupts the natural hydrology of the system. So waves will hit your bulkhead and just reflect right off, and it will actually erode underneath your bulkhead. And usually a bulkhead only has a lifespan of about 20 years. So even having one, you're gonna have to do some maintenance. It can get expensive. So basically, the idea behind a living shoreline is that you have a more natural shoreline. It's healthier for the environment. It's hopefully going to cost you less in the long run. So for people that like to live on the water, we have a lot of water activities that we enjoy. So, Henry, what do you like to do in the water?
Fishing and kayaking.
Absolutely, we love fishing. Who here eats seafood? Yep, So, with a bulkhead, you don't have a lot of room for nursery habitat. A living shoreline creates an entire habitat. Our redfish, our speckled trout, our blue crabs, all use marshes and plants as a nursery. And then when they grow up, they go back into the bay or the ocean, depending on their life history to grow up. So living shorelines are really important as a way to help these animals through their life history. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple different types of living shorelines and different river systems, and kind of give you guys advice of what type of living shoreline to put where, depending on where you live. So say you live on a river. It's really calm, there's not a whole lot of waves, and you want to protect your eroding sandy shoreline. Well, the easiest thing for you to do would be just to plant the appropriate marsh grasses. If you live in a place where it's super still, they're not going to have much erosion or damage to them. And so basically what you would need to do is figure out the salinity of your property and make sure that you plant the right grasses that can live in a fresh or salty environment, depending. And you're also going to want to figure out the right elevation. And all of this is easily accessible online. So that's kind of your easiest, cheapest option.
When you say accessible, you mean the information or the tools you need to test the salinity, or the plants that you
all of it. And I have recommendations if you have questions. Now let's say you live on Foul River and you've got a lot of boat wake, and you plant your marsh grasses, but they all die. I've had this happen to me. All of my plants died. And I said, well, why are they dying? Well, there was too much wave action. And so what you can do, if there's a little bit of wave action, not a whole lot, is you can actually buy core logs. A core log is made out of coconut fibers, and it is woven into a large log structure. You can stick these in front of your plants, and that way when you have a boat speeding by your house, the core logs will basically break up those waves, and that way your plants have time to put their roots down, and they can establish and they will survive. Yeah. So, and they're super easy to get. I mean, you can go online and search for them. They're usually sold in 10-foot segments, and they're about $100 to $200 per segment. So they're not super expensive. So now if you live in a place that's more coastal and you have a lot of wave action, you might not want to go with the core logs because those will get eroded out super quick. So what you may want to do is think about putting in some kind of a breakwater. So something you could purchase is an oyster castle like this. This is essentially adult Legos. All you do is build it up into a pyramid. You can stack these on top of each other. And you have to put it at the right elevation. So at high tide, it should be submerged. At low tide, it should be visible. And this will do a great job at breaking up the waves that come through and will allow your plants to establish. And these are also really cool because they have a lot of space in between them, especially when you build them up. There's a lot of interstitial space. And so these actually serve as great habitat for fish and invertebrates.
So you call it an oyster castle.
Yes.
So would you need to purchase oysters to?
No. The reason they get that name is because if you place them in an environment where you can get oysters, where oyster spat flows through and you have the appropriate environmental conditions, oysters will colonize on this. It's just concrete, and so you can get shellfish that will essentially colonize onto the substrate. But if you're in a place where it's either super fresh or you just don't have oysters coming through, it'll still work as a breakwater. You just won't get oysters on it. So, but it has the name Oyster Castle, which is very cute. Now, if you have a bulkhead and you decide that you want to make your property more environmentally friendly, you want to create a habitat and alter your bulkhead, there's a couple things that you can do. First off being just to rip it out, let your environment and your property restore to its natural state, and kind of go from there. That's not a super popular decision because it's pretty costly. A lot of people don't want to just totally rip out their bulkhead. We're actually experimenting with a new technique. It's been done before. TNC has done this before, and it's actually building outward from your bulkhead. There is a basket, it's called a gabion cage, and you can bolt this to your bulkhead, and you can actually have multiple cages. They'll slope down, and they'll form a natural marsh. You can fill them with sand, and you can plant in them. And you can create an entire marsh that is seaward from your bulkhead. And the benefits of this are you're getting all of your environmental benefits. So you're getting that fish nursery, you're getting natural filtration, you're getting a restored hydrology, and you're also basically reinforcing your bulkhead. So the idea behind it is that it would also strengthen your bulkhead because these cages are really heavy and they're going to stay put. And so instead of 20 years into the future, your bulkhead falling into the water, it's going to be stabilized by this new living shoreline. This is something that's a really new technique. I'm actually experimenting with it with my research. So we don't have a lot of hard data on it yet, but it seems very promising and I'm really excited about it. So basically, if you want to put in a living shoreline, there's a few steps you have to take. So I'm going to go through the steps of a living shoreline, and we can do questions after if you guys have any. So step one would be permitting. Permitting sounds scary. It's not, I promise. I permitted 4 living shorelines. In the state of Alabama, you have to go through the Army Corps of Engineers and you have to go through ADCNR. Usually with your permit, you submit formal documents of your property, usually the deed and a survey if you have it. You'll also send them a sketch of the living shoreline that you want to pursue. And I think after that, it's mostly just filling out a lot of paperwork, and it seems like a nightmare, but I promise you it's not. And the Army Corps is very helpful. Living shorelines are actually gaining a lot of traction along the Gulf Coast. And so the more that are put in, the more that we are all learning together. So I can call the Army Corps on any day and ask them, I have no idea what this means, can you help me? And they can easily answer all of my questions. So then after your permit, you pick the right living shoreline for your site based on the things that we talked about, that wave energy, whether you're in a more coastal place, whether you have a bulkhead. And once you pick the appropriate living shoreline for you, then you can go ahead and start thinking about your money and if you need a contractor and where to get your plants. All of these things, I have recommendations personally. If you want to talk to me, I'm available. We have a great nursery across the bay that I get all of my plants for. I pay about $1 per plug. So if you are trying to pursue a living shoreline that's maybe a little bit more heavy lifting, say you want to do something with your bulkhead or you want to put in a breakwater, you might consider getting a contractor. And again, because we are seeing more and more people put in living shorelines, a lot of the contractors around here are more familiar and are learning kind of the ropes on how to make these shorelines happen. So then after that, it's just thinking about how much money you want to spend, you know, certain things. For example, putting engaging cages, it is a little bit more expensive, but you're gonna reap really amazing benefits from it. And then after that, you should be left with a really beautiful living shoreline. So you'll get all those ecosystem benefits and services from a natural marsh. And so I think they're a great way to go. I love building them. I love working on them. And I personally am seeing the benefits from the ones that I've built. I'm seeing more fish and more shrimp and crabs. And
How long ago did you put them in?
about a year ago. Yeah, so it's not a super hard job, and I really love interacting with my landowners and teaching them and getting them really excited. So what I did was my intern, Carly, who's right here, made this really awesome flow chart of what shoreline to choose based on your property. So if you guys want, you can pass these around. I'd love for you to take one and kind of read about it a little bit. All right, so if you have a laminated card, I am going to ask you to come up here and match it to the right scenario. So, here we have, I'll hold this so you can see. This top one right here is a more coastal system. There is a lot of wave action. You have trees falling over because there is so much erosion. What are we going to do here? What do we think? There is a card that goes. Because we have maybe possible wave. So much wave action.
Nice.
I thought that was right, but I wasn't sure.
Yes, Henry, that is correct. So, for this site, we would want to put in a breakwater of some kind and plant behind it because there is a lot of wave energy, and so we want to make sure that we break up those waves and let the plant survive. All right, so let's go to this one. We have a pretty still creek, not a whole lot going on, minimal wave energy, but it is eroding. So what could we put here?
Could it be appropriate marsh grasses?
Congratulations, Ali, that's the correct answer.
Right.
So, oh yes, we can do it. So in this site, we could just go ahead and plant the appropriate marsh grasses here, and that should be a good technique to prevent our erosion. So over here in this corner, we have a bulkhead, and we have very minimal ecosystem services. What could we do to make this site more environmentally friendly? Yeah. So we could actually transform this bulkhead into a marsh. This picture is actually really cool, and if you want to come up later and look at it, you should. This is a time series of a bulkhead being transformed into a marsh. They installed the cages, they filled them, and they planted, and then a year later, it is fully established and beautiful.
Jamie, you just used the word ecosystem services. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Absolutely. An ecosystem service is something that environment does to provide a benefit. So an ecosystem service could be habitat for fish and invertebrates. It could be filtering and improving the water quality. It could be buffering storm surge or wave action. In this case, that is absolutely true. So it is a benefit that humans and the environment can both reap, which is really cool. So, and then our last corner, we have Sandy Shoreline. This is actually on Dog River. It's moderate wave energy, not a whole lot, but still some. So what could we place here as a living shoreline? Yes! Bring it up. Place it on the board. Great. So in this ecosystem, we would need core logs. These are the core logs made out of coconut, and they are going to break up those smaller waves so that our plants have time to grow and put their roots down. And in about a year or so, they're going to establish and be a big, beautiful marsh. And the cool thing about the core logs is that they do erode over time, and so that coconut just goes out into the water, and it is natural, so it's not going to harm the environment. So I really like using them.
Those of you who have like hanging baskets, you know, the little mats that you put in the bottom of the hanging baskets, it's that material.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. And living shorelines aren't restricted to these 4 types. I mean, the possibilities are kind of endless. You can have lots of combinations of things, but these are just some that I would suggest. And if you're interested in putting a living shoreline in, I would suggest that you go online and do a little bit of research and talk to me if you have any questions. And I think that's about all I have.
If you're planting grasses, if that is the approach that you choose, can you just plant a few at a time, or does it need to all be done kind of at one time?
I would do it all at once, but there are certain ways to space out your plants. It also depends on what kind of plants you're using. So when I do my living shorelines, I get 2-inch plugs, and I place them on 6-inch centers. So that means that every 6 inches I put a plug down, because they need enough room to put out their rhizomes and kind of expand. So you can't put them too close together because they will overcrowd and then they'll all die. I've done that too. I have a lot of lessons that I've learned. But I personally have put all of mine down at once. You also should plant in the appropriate growing season, so I would suggest planting in the spring or summer when it's hotter and when they'll photosynthesize the most. And you just pick a good elevation based on your plant, you can find that information online. Certain plants like to be higher, certain plants like to be lower and more submerged in the water. So, Yes.
So once you plant, are they somewhat maintenance free? I know when we plant things on land, you have to water and you have to water.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering how maintenance.
You can fertilize them, but other than that, so in particular, I plant black needlerush. And that is a plant that likes to be submerged some of the time. And as long as it's underwater for at least like half the day, a little bit less than that, it's happy. So usually they kind of water themselves, which is great. So yeah, they're pretty low